Heading into 2022, I thought that the Atlanta Falcons were going to be the worst team in the league, but they were a lot more competitive than I expected. They won 7 games and overall were, a pretty competitive team. And I did like the additions that they made in free agency, and I thought their draft was pretty solid. So, after the 2022 season and the kind of offseason that they had, I've gained a lot of respect for this team. And I do think that heading into 2023, this team can in fact win their division and make the playoffs. Let me explain. But yeah, before we do get started, please hit that like button if you end up enjoying this video, since it really helps out the channel. And of course, subscribe if you guys are new and you guys enjoy content like this. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get this video started. Now, the main reason why the Falcons were able to exceed expectations and perform a lot better than people expected was because of their offense. Now, their passing offense was absolutely abysmal, but their rushing offense was among the best in the league, and they were pretty solid in other offensive categories as well. And what's impressive is the fact that when you look at the talent that they had on their team last year, it wasn't anything crazy. So, that does actually speak volumes to Arthur Smith, who I'll talk about real quick. I think he is a good coach. I mean, in 2021, they performed a lot better than expected, and in 2022, they did the same. And keep in mind, he didn't have like the most talented teams or anything like that. So, again, I have a lot of respect for Arthur Smith. I think he's a good coach. Some people will criticize him for, I guess you could say, his lack of usage of Kyle Pitts at points in the season, which, I do kind of, I do agree that, he could have targeted Kyle Pitts, he could have gotten Kyle Pitts the ball a little bit more at points in the season, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but, yeah, for the most part, I do like Arthur Smith. But speaking of that offense, that rushing attack, it's going to be lethal in 2023 like it was last year. I mean, you have Tyler Algier, who is one of the most underrated players in the league, if you ask me. He had over 1,000 rushing yards last year on good efficiency, yet no one really seems to talk about it. So, yeah, really good player, really good power back. Plus, you selected Bijan Robinson with, I believe, the 8th overall pick in last year's draft. And Bijan Robinson, this man was one of the best running back prospects we've ever seen, like, in recent memory. I mean, he was the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley, and I'll admit, I was a little bit skeptical of the pick, when it was initially made. In fact, a lot of people were. I thought they should have addressed their defensive line, but, they opted to take Bijan Robinson, and as time has gone on, I gotta say, I don't actually hate this pick. I think it's like a B or B plus if I had to give it like a lettered grade. So yeah, not exactly a terrible pick. I understand the notion that running backs shouldn't be taken super high in the draft, and that running backs are also not as valuable as they once were, which I do agree with to an extent. But with that being said, Bijan Robinson, he is going to be an absolute weapon on that offense, more than just a running back. Like, he's already a really good rusher, but he's also a great receiver as well. So yeah, Bijan Robinson, again, just an amazing player, and I think he is going to have a monster rookie season. And him and Tyler Algier, if you ask me, they're going to form one of the best running back tandems in the league this season. And you also do have Cordarrelle Patterson, and I'll admit I'm a little bit skeptical of his future heading into the I am skeptical of his future with the Falcons. But with that said, he's still a solid player despite the fact that he is on the wrong side of 30. Good weapon in the running game and also the receiving game as well. So yeah, this rushing attack, again, it's going to be absolutely amazing. Your offensive line, I wouldn't say it's terrible. It's not like the Eagles or anything like that. But, there's solid pieces on the offensive line. Chris Lindstrom is one of the best guards in the whole league. You got Jake Matthews and Caleb McGarry, who were both very good tackles. You also did draft Matthew Bergeron, who was one of the better offensive linemen coming out of Syracuse in this past year's NFL draft. And although he was considered a tackle, he is going to be playing guard this season, I believe. So, which I don't actually hate because, he has solid athleticism and he was a pretty good run blocker. So, yeah. As for their receiving core and I guess their skill positions outside of running back, tight end is really good. You got Kyle Pitts, who, as I mentioned before, he definitely had struggled with, the kind of targets he got at points throughout the season, and 2022 was a disappointment for him. Like 2021, great season. People thought he would go nuclear in 2022. Did not happen. And his season was cut short by injuries. But Kyle Pitts, if you ask me, I think he is going to bounce back this upcoming season. I do think Arthur Smith is going to realize, hey, I need to get Kyle Pitts the ball because he's one of our best players in general, and he's also someone with loads of potential. Like, there was a reason why this guy was regarded as one of the best tight end prospects ever, and there was a reason why he was a top 5 pick. So yeah, Kyle Pitts, I still do believe in him, and I still think he is a good player despite the fact that he had a very underwhelming campaign last year. Plus, you do have Jonnu Smith. Unfortunately, I gotta say, Jonnu Smith, thinking about him makes me really sad as a Patriots fan. He was a big flop for us, but with that said, I do think that we could have made more of an effort to have run more 2 tight end sets and have a 2 tight end offense when he was here with us. I mean, of course, he's not blameless at all, but with that said, Jonnu Smith, I do think there is a good player in there. He was pretty good with Tennessee, and maybe a fresh start with Atlanta. Maybe after a fresh start, he can cook and actually, return to the player he once was. But yeah, really what I got to say for tight end, the receiving core, I'll admit, is kind of, it's okay. Drake London is pretty good. I didn't think he should have been the first receiver taken off the board in the 2022 NFL draft, and I'll admit, I did have concerns about his ability to separate at the NFL level, but Drake London had a good rookie season, so, I gotta applaud him for that. Mac Hollins he's an okay receiver. He was actually not that bad for the Raiders, but he's not anything crazy either. Outside of that, you got Scotty Miller, I guess, who, he's fine. He's really nothing crazy, but yeah, Drake London, good. Mac Hollins, fine. Rest of the guys, whatever. But yeah, this receiving core, it's okay. But now we got quarterback to round things out with the offense. If you ask me, the kind of quarterback play that they get is going to be a big factor in how the Falcons do in 2022. Now, in 2023, excuse me. But last year, they had really bad quarterback play for a majority of the season. Look, I'm an Oregon Ducks fan. Marcus Mariota at Oregon was amazing. But unfortunately, he has not panned out in the NFL, and he was not very good last year. In fact, Arthur Smith, he designed a system to, mask Mariota's flaws as much as he could. But yeah, Desmond Ridder, he is going to be the starting quarterback for now heading into the 2023 season, and he started the last 4 games for them last year, and he was alright, but I will say, it's kind of hard to gauge how good he is at the moment, because, he barely played last year, but, coming out of Cincinnati, I thought he was not that bad. He had good physical tools, he had a decently strong arm, and he could use his legs, and he could run, but, his mechanics were not good, and his accuracy was extremely inconsistent because of it, and it was ultimately what held him back as a quarterback prospect. But Desmond Ridder, he is someone who I do actually have a little bit of faith in. The physical tools are there. It's just a matter of, can he improve his accuracy and be more consistent with it? And can he improve his mechanics? So really, we just gotta wait and see how he does play. But I do have some faith in him, and I do think there is a world where he is the Falcons franchise quarterback. And even if he doesn't play well, they do have Taylor Heineke, and Taylor Heineke, he's nothing crazy, but he is a pretty good game manager, and he definitely is an upgrade from Marcus Mariota. But yeah, man, this offense, it's going to be extremely good. Up next, we got that defense, and their defense last year, It was terrible yet again. They ranked 23rd overall as a unit, but, despite the fact that they did have a pretty bad defense last year, that's not to say that they're completely devoid of good players on that side of the ball. Like, you already had Grady Jarrett, who's a really good defensive tackle. You had AJ Terrell, who's a great cornerback. Richie Grant was honestly not that bad last year. Michael Walker, I thought he was alright last season. And, but yeah, overall, the Falcons' defense, really not that good last year. Oh yeah, I did forget to mention, they do have Arnold Ebiketie and Troy Anderson, who have a lot of promise, but yeah, again, defense, not very good last year, but they made a lot of good additions to that unit. I mean, they got a new defensive coordinator. He was with the Saints. I don't remember his name at the moment, but, maybe a new defensive coordinator could certainly help. And they made a lot of nice additions, as I said before. Like, you signed Jesse Bates, who is, one of the better safeties in the league. I wouldn't call him like a top 5 safety, but I would say he's like top 12 to 15, somewhere in that range. Plus, you signed Caden Ellis and David Onyemata from your arch nemesis in the New Orleans Saints, and both of those guys, very good players. And you signed Calais Campbell, who, he's nothing crazy. He's not the same player he was in Arizona or Jacksonville, but he can still play at a pretty decent level. And you signed Bud Dupree, who, he was a big flop with the Titans, and we know that he's a guy who's best suited as a number 2 pass rusher. I mean, he was a really good, partner in crime next to TJ Watt, and while I don't expect this guy to have like 14 sacks or anything like that, I do think it's very viable that he gets anywhere from like 4 to like 7 sacks. So, yeah. These guys might not be superstars, but they are very solid players at the bare minimum. Plus, they didn't trade for Jeff Okudah, who, up until this point has been a big letdown. But with that being said, he wasn't terrible for the Lions, if you ask me, last year. I actually think he showed some promise, and, maybe a fresh start can help him reach his potential that a lot of people thought he had coming out of Ohio State. So, that does it for the free agency and trade market additions. Plus, in the draft, you drafted Clark Phillips, who was a really good cornerback coming out of Utah, and you drafted Zach Harrison, who he's very raw. But that said, he has all the athletic tools to be a really good player. So, as long as you're patient with him, and if you can get some good coaches to help him add some more pass rush moves, Zach Harrison, I do think he can blossom into being a pretty good player. Now, taking a look at their schedule, their division is possibly the worst in the league, which really helps them out. I do think it's possible that they win, as much as 4 of their division games, but at worst, I think they'll only win 2 of them. But yeah, they do play in a very weak division. Then you play the NFC North, and I'd say they win at least 1 of those games, and at most they win 3 of them. Then they play the AFC South, and the AFC South, like the NFC South, well, they're one of the worst divisions in the league. So I do think they will win at least 2 of those games, and I think they could win, as, if you ask me, maybe all of those games. I mean, I understand that the Jaguars are a really good team, but, upsets do happen. I do think it's possible that they win all of those games. And then the last 3 games, they're against the Cardinals, the Jets, and the Commanders, and they could definitely win 2 of those, and maybe even all of them. So, worst case I see is that they only win 6 games, but I do think they can win as much as 10 or 11 games. And, the NFC South, if you ask me, it's going to be a three-way race between the Saints, the Panthers, and the Falcons. And, I do think the Saints and the Falcons are actually pretty good teams, but I also think the Falcons are a good team as well. You got a good offense, you got a pretty good head coach, and, your defense, I do think it's going to be much improved, and I think it will be a respectable unit in 2023. And, the Falcons and the Saints, as I said before, good teams. If I had to go over some concerns with them, though, the Saints, they're not bad, but the thing is, like, I don't really like Dennis Allen that much as a head coach. I'm going to be quite honest here. Plus, that pass rush, it's very concerning. And, Derek Carr, he's not a bad quarterback. I do think he does provide some stability to that team. But that said, he's not a top 5 quarterback either. And when you look at the Carolina Panthers, I like the Panthers as a team. I think that they will be pretty good. But there is also a scenario where they are pretty bad in 2023. Like, let's say Bryce Young turns out to be, let's say he has a bad rookie year. Then the Panthers are probably going to be a really bad team, But yeah, if Dennis Allen, if he really does screw up the Saints, and if Derek Carr is like really mid, and let's say Bryce Young is a bad rookie year, and the Buccaneers, let's say Todd Bowles remains the head coach, and Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask both play terribly, then yeah, I think the Falcons should be set up, pretty well to win this division. Their offense, as I said before, I think it's going to be really good. Defense, I think it's going to be much improved. So yeah, the Falcons, they're not going to be a terrible team heading into this year. And I do think that they, at the bare minimum, will win 6 to 7 games and be really, really competitive. And at most, they could win double-digit games. Now, how much they do in the playoffs, and that's a debate for another time. But again, the Atlanta Falcons, do not sleep on them heading into 2023. This team, they really are not that bad, but that's all I got to say for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. It really means a lot to me. Again, like, subscribe, do all of that stuff, and you guys can check me out on social media, and the links in the description below. But yeah, without further ado, I'm out, you guys.